The only real hope and change you'll ever get is from God. It's going to come from the Lord, or it's not going to come at all. It's going to come when you admit that you can't do it and that you've got to have His help.
Part of this conversation will deal with certain things we're going to experience. I'll name some. Very high winds, full of smoke and cinders, extremely high winds. Number two, blood rain. Not something that looks like blood rain. Blood rain. Those are our two topics. The reason being is people are going to experience it. Experts will come out and say, well, the reason why we're having this blood rain is from the Arabian desert that was caught in the stratosphere. No, that's not the case. There's a huge difference between dust particles and blood cells. Yes, I said blood rain. And it has to do with our atmosphere and what gets caught in the atmosphere. We'll start on the blood rain issue, because one day we're going to have to entertain rain with a tint of a type reddish-orange color, as it did in Sri Lanka, as it did in Australia, as it did in multiple other countries. We're going to have to deal with that. The findings of the red rain are very clear. Now, the United States wants nothing to do with this topic. I'll tell you that right up front. The raindrops that occurred several times that were reported since the year 2000 and up as late as 2 months ago, at first glance, they look like dust, and they really did think it was sands from the Arabian desert, but that wasn't the case. After analysis of substance in the rain, they had findings. It determined that they all had the markers of blood cells. In fact, their size was very similar to blood cells. There was a strange attribute that they had. There were no markers of phosphorus. Now, normally, phosphorus indicates DNA, and everything has to have DNA to replicate itself. Not so with these cells. They had no phosphorus, no DNA, yet they replicate. They replicate. They're very dangerous. So today we're going to explain possibly what has been happening, and it could give you a clearer vision on why we have so many diseases, because we're going to entertain this rain sooner rather than later. But listen, this stuff has been falling for years. It's been falling for years. It's been affecting everything from the water supply to the animals to plant life. And you've been consuming it. You absolutely have been consuming it. The cellular structure of these organisms that do replicate are similar to a red blood cell. They have the markers of blood, therefore they call it blood, but they don't know what type of blood it is. How did it get here? Well, that's going to be phase 2 of our topic. But let me explain to you what's in the cell. They still have the samples of that of the blood that was in the rain. They still have the samples. The cellular wall is extremely thin on these organisms, unlike a regular blood cell. But on the outside of this cell are high concentrations of uranium, very high concentrations of uranium. That means if it mixes with human blood, it will increase cancer. It can be a direct result of malformation in children. It will directly affect the nervous system of children. It can cause a host of problems. It can also cause viruses on the earth to mutate. It can do that. Now, the last specimen was taken 2 months ago. Same material, same structure, same everything, with even higher concentrations of uranium on the cell wall. Very high concentrations of uranium. One day we're going to entertain the fact that this rain is going to fall all over the place. If you're smart, you won't go out in it. You have to stay indoors. But we're going to entertain that fact because of their delivery method. Number one, they're not indigenous to Earth. That's a strange fact. They don't come from Earth, and that's been proven. Here was the process. Prior to this rain falling, comets fly by, but it's those that explode in the atmosphere that seed the stratosphere full of these cells that fall as rain, and they multiply very fast. They're almost immune to high doses of heat, 1400 degrees, extreme cold, they can survive. And they live in the core of meteorites. Listen, they have obtained the rocks of meteorites going back at least 200 years. And in every single case, the same blood cell was found inside the rock, not on the outside, inside. It's almost like a deliberate delivery method being used. In fact, a lot of meteorites on the inside are teeming with things they will never disclose. But these blood cells are absolutely inside meteorites that explode in the atmosphere. Space is teeming with life, folks. Some life we understand, some life we don't. Some life forms are very large. Space is teeming with life. It's not dead, it's teeming with life. Contagions are going to be a problem in the months to come, because now we're passing through that zone I was telling everybody about a long time ago. The process would begin as dust, and it would continue, and we would continue to pass through a certain zone. As we pass through this zone, our atmosphere is going to be inundated with fragments and particles and dust, which will begin to change a great many things. This red rain is going to be an issue. That rain is alive. So is the rain that falls like a gelatin-type substance. That's actually part of a living organism. They will not tell you about these things because they need you to live in your small, comfortable world. But understand that God made all these things. All these things were created. And yes, they hide the major things from you. They're going to do that so that they can have a portion of control. It keeps you coming back to them for instruction. The elite know. I'm not talking about Obama. Listen to me when I say this. The elite are none of the public people you see. The people who call the shots are the ones you never see. The ones that are stationary that never move. Not the talking heads that are in front of people. They are not the elite. They are the spokespersons for the policies made behind closed doors. These people in America would be your civil servants at the highest levels. Civil servants you'll never see. They are career people. The rest of them are public figureheads. They are not the elite. Just please remember that. Space is not what you thought it was. They have taken viruses into space and found out that they're 700 times more potent when they leave Earth's atmosphere. Earth is a perfect container to subdue everything inside of it. Outside of it, life begins to mutate. Things that could destroy mankind replicate faster. Their toxins increase by 700%. Take the Ebola virus, for instance. Take these few. Listen, after Ison passed, no one paid attention, and I had asked folks to pay attention to the disease that happens after every comet with a visible tail passes the Earth. It has consequences. It's a slow process, yes, but it has consequences. Now I want you to ask yourself a question. What is more likely? That the elite have planted this virus all over the Earth so that everybody could get sick, or that they knew this was going to happen until they folded their hands, knowing that they can contain this virus, but simply won't. Here's one thing you need to know. The people who run these nations are at least 1,000 steps beyond everybody else. They can see further into space than they have told you. They know the intimacies about things that we take for granted. They know exactly what the sun is doing, what's influencing the sun. They know the fate of the moon. They know the fate of the moon. They also know that super expansion will soon take effect in our sun. You've been taught that that happens over millions of years. They have observed this happen within hours, not millions of years, hours. They understand what's happening, but it's important that you understand so you don't lose your cool. When the red rain falls, I'm going to ask yourself this question. How many unfortunate individuals will think this red rain is harmless and will consume it? And to be honest with you, they don't know what happens immediately with the ingestion of these cells into the human host. They don't know what happens. They do know it has a high concentration of uranium, which is radioactive, by the way, on the cellular walls, which can mutate your flesh within months. All of us, when this comes, when you see this red rain, and listen, it's been falling. It's been very sporadic and remote, but it's been falling. Don't go in the rain. How many unfortunate people who don't understand this will step in the rain, slowly be consumed by it? You know, a lot of people say, well, the Lord's not going to allow that to happen. Listen, the Lord said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. He said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. This has happened and has been documented since 2000. In several cases, just about every single year, this has happened. And I'm telling you, the people that were infected, they had a horrible fate. And the U.S. government wants nothing to do with it. If you ingest anything radioactive in high concentrations, you're going to get radioactive poisoning. That will be like you pitching up a camp right there at Fukushima. That's what will happen if you ingest this stuff. But the animals have been consuming the rain in these regions, and the cells are found within the core of meteorites that fall to Earth, within the core. And it has all three markers of red blood cells, but it does not have DNA. If there's a phosphorus that's missing, once they test for phosphorus, and they don't see phosphorus, then they are inclined to believe that it's not an organism but something else. It's not algae. They tested that against known forms of algae. It's not what it is. Now in the Bible, didn't it say hail, fire mingled with blood? Didn't it say that? Hail, fire mingled with blood. Now you can understand. And I just wanted to be sure of the findings for myself before I said anything. So it's actual blood, not something that looks like blood. It's actual blood. And in fact, things without a phosphorus trace with no DNA is not supposed to replicate. Hail from the altar in the heavens. Most of the meteorites you see, it's made up of water, high traces of arsenic, but it's a liquid compound. Ice balls. They've also found ice balls with a crust of hard material on the outside, which means that if one of those were to enter our atmosphere and explode, the outer portion would explode, but the inner portion would simply spread out, and then you have large hail from explosion. Now, because the core of it is ice and the external portion is rock, it makes it through the first layer of the atmosphere, and then it explodes. And large stones, hailstones, start falling to Earth because the rock will crack up. Well, if we go through a shower of this, well, there you go. And because these red blood cells are often found at the core of both ice and hard rock in iron meteorites, there you go. Now you have an issue and a problem. By the way, these cells replicate very fast. Not slow, they replicate very fast. So it's real blood we're talking about here. Many people don't know this, and when it begins, they're going to think it's, desert sand particles, which, by the way, are also red. But they're not alive. That has happened too. They've examined the water in certain places, and it had dust particles from the Arabian desert. But the red rain is totally different. It looks like blood, and we all know we're about to experience this. And it does carry contagions. Blood can carry instructions for a contagion. You see, but this cell has no DNA. The DNA is the instruction on how to replicate itself. It has no instruction. How in the world is it replicating? So that's going to be an issue we will experience. Those cells are not from Earth. All the living organisms that we know about have phosphorus in their DNA, so they can replicate. Mayer says, is this the same as in the days of Egypt with Pharaoh and Moses when it rained? You know what? I think it is. I think it is. And I think God controls the timing of this. I think he sent harbingers because every place this stuff has fallen, the people are rich in voodoo and other crazy stuff that they do. I think he's showing the world. That's why he told you to watch. He's showing the world exactly what he's going to do. And listen, the United States desires to keep you dumb about all these topics. The other countries know about this stuff. You don't know about this stuff. Some of the places it rained red was desert dust. It was not the cells. But I'm talking about they had the blood cells in it. It was not from the dust. It had the blood cells. I mean concentrations, high concentrations of these cells. The dust storms we can track by weather patterns. This stuff, they had weeks of this stuff falling, uranium. And the United States won't touch the subject, though it's documented. And though they've already made things to combat it. Now, listen to me. Why would they make something to combat a contagion that spawned from uranium and these blood cells? Why would they make something to protect themselves from the blood rain, yet they fail to acknowledge it? Don't be ignorant, folks. Don't be ignorant. It's Tatum, it has uranium on the outside. Uranium is radioactive. It's radioactive. And so it can, over time, begin to cause things. But I say this, I really do believe that everything is the Lord's doing. You'll be okay. Now, naturally, you take precautions. You don't go out there and tempt God by jumping into a fire and playing in it. So don't go out there and play with that stuff. If you see this stuff falling, go inside. Go inside, get away from it. Go wash your arms and stuff out. But listen, if it falls in concentrations within the United States, it's going to ruin water supplies. It will utterly ruin water supplies. Most of your bottled water coming from the Great Lakes and other places, ruined. Beware of that, the red rain. The red rain. Because it's coming and it's real. You know, I like to give you precautions of things that people normally don't touch on. Well, there's not enough time, and the subject has to be, before you get someone a caution, you have to do your own investigation with some very real things. So you have to track down a lot of facts, and then you have to see if the United States government's prepared to deal with it. They won't admit to it, but they're prepared to deal with it. Now, only God can do this. Now, we've had meteors fly in very close, they don't tell you about, and it has not hit anything. On the opposite side of that, and saying something contrary to that, we've had vessels lost with people inside from meteor showers. They won't tell you that either. The U.S. has had their share of losses in space. Russia has had their share of losses in space. Europe has had their share of losses in space. And it happens. But all throughout this, you've been protected. You've been watched over. You haven't been hit in the head by meteorites. Some people have. Meteorites are killing people every single day. We have a lot to be thankful for. Things could be totally different. But it's the Lord's grace and mercy, His hand upon things, that's keeping it back right now. But as I said last night, as this evil intensifies, more and more things will be allowed to happen. Because one day the harvest will be right for the harvesters to actually harvest. We're being protected from things we have no idea. You know, your life can be worse. Moxie, I'm not sure. It certainly is not. It's a derelict life form. There's no way they can do, they can have so many samples inside the rock of meteorites with the exact same cell involved. So it can withstand very hot and cold temperatures because they do survive in space all the way here. They do survive in space. I would say it's a high probability that they can totally dry up and still be alive. They're not made like anything that we've observed. They save some of the ointment that's left on people who have disappeared. They reappear. They have puncture marks all over them. There's an ointment that's used, and the materials are not traceable. They don't match any element on Earth. They match no elements on Earth. In fact, those elements, by our standards, should not exist. The ointment is left on people, and they just show up dead. The point of these conversations is so that you're aware, because you're going to entertain this red rain. You will see this red rain. Now that you know, it's not a joke, it's real. Stay out of it. It's full of blood cells, the blood types we don't understand, but stay out of that rain. Try not to ingest any. Of course, I'm sure that the animals, the food we eat, has been tainted by it, which is why you should pray over your food. Some people get nervous because they don't believe the power. You know, if you pray over your food, the condition before your prayer is totally different than after your prayer. I'm a firm believer in that. I've eaten stuff where everybody else got sick except me. You know, what is that? It's happened more than once. I've been exposed to lots of depleted uranium, nerve agents, and everybody who's brain dead, they can't walk. They're not very functional. You keep your eyes on Him. You put your trust in Him. He will keep your path clear. The next thing we're going to talk about is the ash and the smoke. That will most certainly, undoubtedly, in my opinion, be in the air. We're going to have to deal with that. And you know what? I know that we've heard of volcanoes erupting. I know during Mount St. Helens, for those of us who are old enough, did experience that. We have not been involved with a large ejection, but it's bound to happen with the activity under the waters they're not telling you about. And yes, Mayor, the Atlantic crack is huge, and it's the beginning of, listen to me, that's a trigger point, by the way. Let's talk about this Atlantic crack real quick. I'm gonna inform. You know what? Since the 1200s, they've been reporting booms all around the land masses surrounding the North Atlantic and portions of the South Atlantic. Booms. Even to this day, the booms are being heard, and they are not recorded from seismic sensors. They're not emanating from the crust. Anyway, the Sounds that people are hearing, they've been hearing for hundreds of years. They're not recorded in the crust of the earth. But if for those of you who have studied sound, you know that sometimes sound waves in an object can pass through its outer layer without being detected, but be heard externally from the object. That happens through a difference of pressure. In other words, something internal inside the earth, below the magma, is moving and violently shifting. And the crust at this point is not actually being disturbed. However, that's not always going to be the case. This crack in the Atlantic could be responsible for the earthquake that moves every island and mountain out of its place. Nickel iron material is floating up on the ocean floor. Anybody know what that indicates? Nickel, high concentrations of nickel and iron metal flowing up. That comes from the core. That is thought to come from the core. The earth is spewing out nickel and iron, and it's settling on the ocean floor, rising, steadily rising. This is a phenomenon that has just taken place in the last couple of years. Now listen to me, the inside of the earth is almost intimately tied to the sun's activity. The sun's activity is intimately tied to something else, something people know about, something that is not a mystery, but something that will affect the entire solar system. Most of the solar systems they have observed are binary systems or more. It is extremely rare to find any system with one sun. Most binary universes, most of them with two suns, the sun passes, both suns will orbit and pass, they have observed, somewhere between 40,000 years and 80,000 years. That's a long time. 40,000 and 80,000, that's a long time. Normally it's chaotic, because if you have two suns and they have an oval orbit, which means at their closest point the solar systems are in chaos. Both suns are close together, the solar systems mesh together, everything begins to drift and everything begins to happen until they go back out, and then all the elements resettle themselves. Now, it's a known fact in our solar system, there was a perturber that has caused certain planets to settle where they are. It's already known in times past that the orbits of the planets were different than they are now. Something has disturbed them, and whatever it was appears to be coming back again. You see, there's one thing mankind has to do, that is they have to document everything that they see. They have to. They have to document everything they see. They wrote this down. They wrote the signs down. They documented their observations. They've also documented the Earth's observations. Because like the seasons, there's a season when the sun rises twice. That's a double wobble, the beginning of a double wobble. But what historians hide from you is the calamity that took place after the sun rose twice in one day. They skip that part. They skip the part where men died because they could not breathe. They skip the part when the land masses began to burn and the temperatures were so hot it turned sand to glass. They skip those parts. They also skip the part when this phenomena happens. People are plagued by devils. They skip that part. See, they skip that part. They don't want to tell you about it. They want you safe and secure, not knowing that you contend with very real demonic entities and fallen angels that are out there. And by the way, fallen angels are all over the place. You think they just dwell on one little tiny rock? No, the Bible says they left their state for this estate. They were all over the heavens in charge of all the stars. They're everywhere. Where you see a star, there are angels out there somewhere. They're all over the place. I looked at that one day, and I really looked at the book of Enoch to see what the deal was. They're all over the place. All these people who are so fascinated with extraterrestrial life, they don't understand what's happening. They don't understand that the bad ones come first. They don't understand that they're talking to fallen angels. They don't get it. They don't understand that. These UFOs you see, those are fallen angels. I'm telling you right now, they're fallen angels. The ones that shut down the nuclear missiles and so forth, likely watchers. They don't interact with people. The fallen angels interact with people. They're marking them for possession, using them to reproduce vessels, so they can inhabit them. They take reproductive material from males and females all the time, and they're making hybrids all the time. Why in the world would anyone be abomination? Abomination, that's what that is. An abomination is anything God did not make or instruct to be made. That's an abomination. Lou, if they allow it, listen, when God decides it's time, He's not going to withhold. There is a restrainer here. There is a restrainer that will not allow mankind to do what they want to do. But when the restrainer is not here, when He's not restraining, then people will see the real evil. The restrainer. And you know what that word restrainer, just to tell you, was a powerful angel with angels under him. Just to let you know. If you research that, you'll come up with the same results. The restrainer is like a guardian, and there are other angels underneath the restrainer that will not allow things to happen outside of God's timing. There have been plenty of times a nuclear war was supposed to happen, but it didn't. Why? Because the missile systems were recoded. The trajectories changed. So if they had launched it, they would have hit themselves. That is to say, everything is under control. Everything is under control. One day, the Lord will not, He will not restrain certain things from happening. There will likely be a nuclear launch. I don't know I doubt that you'll experience that. Some of us, you might. I hope I'm at ground zero if one goes off. Then I will change in the twinkling of an eye. I'm not afraid of such things because whatever the Lord allows is good for the children. Let me say that again. Whatever He allows is good for the children. Whatever He allows is good for the children. The Lord is good. He's good. And most people don't know what they're protected from. And they get in these depressed moments. Listen, things can be worse, but things are being restrained so that you can finish your race. Many things are being restrained. Truth be told, believe it or not, there are things living in the ocean that are spooky and scary. There are things living in the earth alongside with mankind. These are living creatures. No one can explain. They remain elusive. They're held back from interactions with mankind. That will be taken away when the veil is lifted. The heavens are absolutely inhabited. There's been a war in the heavens for many years now. Parts dropping down to earth. It's been observed, too. Things working alongside mankind. You really think we're in space to experiment on how a spider spins a web? You think we're really in space to try and solve cancer? They know how to cure cancer. And they absolutely will not let that out for anything. All of that is part of population control, so when a disease happens, they can control who lives and who dies. That's the truth. That's population control. If everybody was healed, if everybody was fixed, we'd have too many people, not enough resources for the people. Yes, son. And war is another mechanism. And listen, they want a war. They absolutely want a war. And if they have a chemical, biological, radiological war, they can solve all their problems. They just have to make it believable. Now there's a coalition that will be going against ISIS. Do you know what that's going to unleash? Do you really know what that's going to unleash? You see, a jihad is when the West attacks the core of the Muslims. Now you have a jihad. Now you have a real war. And when a real war is declared, you're going to start seeing who stands up for who. When the West reacts, we have comforts we need to take advantage of. And what I mean by this is every single day you have is a blessing so that you can grow further. Maximize your growth in the Lord. Maximize. Yes, it is, Secret. Yes, it is. The earth to them, listen, they don't think like you do. They don't think like you do. They don't live like you do. Their thoughts are different than your thoughts. Their values very different than your values. They do not cherish life as you do. They don't care about their brothers and sisters as you do. They operate by policy and by an end agenda, and nothing gets in their way for that agenda. They'll destroy anyone who gets in the way. But you've been protected all this time and didn't know it from a great many things that could have taken you out, because some people meet a horrible fate with a lot of things. There are people who have sought spiritual things, demonic things, and were tortured and killed by those same demons. There are some people who hunt for UFOs, and the UFOs showed up and took them and made their life a living nightmare. We are, in fact, protected. Yes, they are mutilated. In fact, you know what, it's worse than you could possibly believe. We're talking tens of thousands per day. Tens of thousands per day in the U.S. alone. Missing, gone, never to be found. These people are not bums. These are middle-class individuals. Gone. But no trace of them every single day. And all of them were taken under very strange circumstances. People always report the little bright light. This is why I advise a person not to be interested in those things. Because what you do is you end up wanting to really see what is what. And if you saw what was what, that still wouldn't answer your question, because with dark forces, there is always another question. They will never satisfy you. That's exercising a lust within a person. A lust cannot be satisfied. And you give them all that attention, and you invite them into your life because you sincerely desire to see the occupants of these pretty little lights you see. And don't go there. Even though you are protected, if you open the door to them, they will come in because you invited them. That's why it's not good to be angry and bitter and all these things. Those are open doors. So anything can walk in. And some people have opened their doors broad, so anything can walk in. Fallen angels come in many forms and many types. Strict. Here's the difference between a fallen angel and an angel who still maintains their state. A fallen angel who lost their position is strict. They're strict. They can't do everything the angels want to do. Even Satan was cursed to be in a form in the Garden of Eden. He was cursed to be in a form. That same thing, they call him Kesarat. This is what your leadership calls him, Kesarat, the great horned dragon. And there were 4 dragons. Truth be told, there were 4 dragons. Satan is the last dragon. Anyway, I'm not going down that road. But if you have open doors to yourself, you better shut them. You better shut them quickly. You know what, Gary, to see Satan is not physical eye. But when you see bitterness, when you see torture, when you see people do things that degrade or bring down the life of others, you've seen them. When you see utter confusion, when you see the effects of evil upon a person's life, you've seen them. So then, I chose a different path, so I don't seek after such things, although I have been plunged in a world that is very different. But I do believe the Lord prepared me to deal with a great many things. You see, once you face a darkness, you understand that that darkness is always there. Then you can really see it. Some of you cannot see the darkness, and I advise you of this. Don't go looking for the darkness. Once you know that darkness and what's really there, you have to live with it. It's just like having a good experience with the Lord. Once you have that, you just can't forget it. It changes you forever. When the Lord opens your eyes fully, you have to be able to handle that. Some people see the good and the bad side. I'm talking beyond human sight. They see the good spiritual side and how things work. They also see the bad side. You won't see one without the other. And the Lord will allow you to see what you can handle. He'll never go beyond what you can handle. That's why you have to be wise. See, if you're doing what you can with what you have, normally you'll find out that you've come a long way. If you do what you can with what you have, believe me, in most cases that is sufficient. And it's all based on the vessel. It depends on what type of vessel you are. Mine just so happen to be, maybe it's a little deeper, because I deal with a lot more. But what it has done was turn me against anything, any appearance of evil. I can see it in many things. I can see it for me. The Lord allows me to know the devices of the enemy, how sneaky Satan really is, how he presents himself as a mountain, but he's really a rock. Once you see that side, you can understand. But then you also are not the same. You won't be the same. And it's not a bad thing. It's based upon the conditions of which the Lord made you. He designed us all for very specific things. Some vessels are not able to handle what another vessel is. That's why I don't envy anybody else's gifts or anything else. I do not envy another person. I don't want to be like another person. I can only be me. Good or bad, I can only be me. But I will maximize in the service for my Lord, because we're all learning to perfect our walk in the Lord. We're all seeing things so that we can walk effectively. Because when the Spirit does pour out on all flesh, will you be a recipient of the good or recipient of the guilt, because that's what's going to happen. If you read the book of Isaiah, when the Spirit pours out on all flesh, some people are going to be so guilty they're going to hold their head down and not ask for forgiveness, knowing they deserve death. I don't want the Spirit to pour out on me and then I feel guilty. So I'm doing everything I can do each day to maximize an effective walk for my Father, because He loves me and I know it. Jesus Christ loves me and I know it. See, when you know He loves you, you don't worry about things. You're not scared about anything. Your concentration is in, what is the Lord trying to show me? You tend to throw everything off. You understand that He's in control. When things go haywire, you say, okay, Lord, what are you trying to show me in this? In other words, there are no burdens on your life. There are not no burdens on your life. The only debt that you will owe, that burden will be a burden of love for your brothers and sisters. Because we do owe a debt of love, but when you know God loves you, that becomes your focus. You tend to read the Word, not challenge the Word. Your eyes will be opened. You'll contend with more. You'll convey and display more. And it's all about getting rid of your flesh. The flesh will become your enemy. You won't like the flesh. You will begin to operate under the guidance of the Spirit. You'll continually pray and consider the Lord in everything that you do. He'll be at the forefront of everything that you do. Your desires will change. Your mind is certainly transformed. Your mind is renewed. You are transformed. You do become a new man. And the old man to you is dead and disgusting. That's what happens. But all of that comes with a preparation. And all of us are going through a type of preparation now, which is why it's important not to reject it, but to embrace it, knowing that all things are in the hands of the Father to them that believe. See, because you believe in Jesus Christ, the Father loves you. You're being guided. Your steps are being ordered. You will prevail. You will prevail. Test all things. Learn while you have the chance. Work while it is day. Because the night is surely coming when no man can work. There'll be no recipients of your knowledge. No man can work in the night. This is daytime, and we have to take advantage of it. Not attempt to build a paradise for ourselves here on earth. That's a mistake for a great many people. They attempt and try to build a paradise here on earth. Change your mind from that. We know that revelation will come true and many things will be broken down. Substance will be lost. People will have to move from their homes. Things will be scattered. Don't become complacent and build your paradise in your home. Your hope, your paradise, should be with the Father in heaven, not here. If your treasure is here on earth, so is your heart. My treasure's not here. It's with the Father. He broke me of that early. He did. He impressed it. You know, in the service you move around a lot, right? I'll share this story with you. And when I was first beginning, you get stationed all over the place. Every time I got restationed, you know, I'd go get stuff. To have a bachelor's pad, you know, all your stuff, your electronics and all this stuff, right? In every single case when I did that, something popped up where I had to go right away. And I ended up giving everything away every single time. I'd just tell someone to go get it, you can have it all. Everything. 3 times I did that. And then I got the message. Don't do that again. Don't build up things here on earth. Don't do that again. Because if the Lord, listen, the message I got was this. If I call you to move and you have too much stuff where you are, you're not going to hear me. You're going to stay where your heart is. Don't do that. That's when I got the message. I said, okay. That's the end of that. See, when I get stuff, never get anything you're not prepared to walk away from. Because it can actually hold your heart to that place, and you will choose not to hear God and protect your stuff. That's what happened. And the Lord broke me of that. He said, no, don't do it. For me, I have to be ready to go when the Lord calls me. And the military assisted in giving me training in that. Because God knows I've been all over the place. Now it's not a problem. I'm highly mobile. But some of us have built our paradise here on earth. And our hearts are with our stuff. You don't want to lose your pictures because they're sentimental. That's sentimental value. And all your stuff is going to burn up. I'm just being blunt with you. All these catastrophes, like Katrina, and the tornadoes you've seen, just tore people's lives apart. And I watched them cry because they said they can't get the memories back that were hanging on the wall. And then I thought to myself, if they had only prepared themselves and listened to the instructions of God, it would not have affected them so much. it will not have affected them so much. Never gather things you're not prepared to give away. See, if I can't utilize what I get for the service of someone else, I'm telling you right now, I won't get it. I won't get it. I don't desire it. I find it useless. If I can't use it for someone else, I find it useless. There are no couches in a house that people can't sit on. There's no, dishes that people can't use. None of that stuff. If I can't serve another person with it, I don't want it. I just simply don't want it. Why would I get it in the first place? That's called storing up treasure. I don't want that. That's what we cannot do, because you won't hear the Father. You won't hear him. Okay, folks, we're going to talk about some high winds. We got the blood rain. Certainly it's real blood rain. Isn't that somewhat amazing? How in this day and age the Father reveals his prophecy, and we find out it was literal. Nobody would have ever guessed that was literal blood, but we have the examples in the earth. Isn't that something? It is literal, and it's very different, very different. Now, a lot of people think that Revelation is not literal. It's something else, but I often have to remind myself that John saw this in a vision. And if I saw some things in a vision, what would be my best description? Sometimes you have dreams, and you see a small thing, you really get a close look at it in your dreams or visions. You'll sometimes inspect things, and it's just something that real blood cells are falling with the rain, and that can actually happen and will likely happen. Like he was talking about the locust. Now, he observed the locust. He gave us a description of the locust. Now, I often have to remind myself that he was seeing a vision. Incredible. I'd say it's incredible. Okay, folks, we know we're going through some geological changes. And with geological changes, atmospheric phenomena do often happen. We know that our sun is throwing a conniption fit because we're having wicked shimmies all over the place from the sun. Radiation changes. Every flare that comes towards the earth is absorbed. Most people would have you believe it's deflected, but it's not. It's absorbed. Have you noticed that since the flares started striking Earth at a certain frequency, the atmospheres begin to change? The Earth is more active geologically. It's taking in all this energy. And if you understand energy has to flow. It's not like a lithium battery. There's too many avenues that energy can be converted to. Just like water. You begin to heat up water, the water molecules move faster and faster until you have a boiling effect. Then you have a steam effect, so the water is constantly in motion. Magma, the same way. Solar radiation being absorbed in the North and the South Pole. Why? Because the protection layer in the North and South Pole is gone. Anybody notice that? We have a huge hole at the North and South Pole. It's gone. It's just not there. All that solar radiation is pouring into the North and South Pole because the atmospherics are gone. And so all that energy is feeding inside the Earth. Now, there's another component internally to Earth, but it's causing volcanism to also rise. What's disturbing the sun, and the sun disturbs the Earth and the other planets as well, is going to increase volcanism in conjunction with the vibrations, a constant and steady vibration that has already taken effect sooner than what they expected. It's already begun, it's already started. So geologically, we're having some changes. At some point in the future, folks, we're going to entertain very high winds, pyroclastic flows in certain areas, a very dark sky full of ash, soot, and cinders. And again, you're going to have to stay indoors. Now, I believe, based on a dream of sorts, now just at first I didn't understand it. I didn't quite understand it. Yes, redeemed. Redeemed is right. The protection is gone and it's fading away fast everywhere else. It really is. From a dream, I observed in a dream, I was sitting behind a piece of glass on a couch looking outside. There were very high winds blowing. It's very high winds. It was dark. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of your face. That's how thick the smoke was. Full of cinders. Yet, the place where I was not touched. There were other people this to the other, and the dream pages fled and so forth. Those people's homes were not burned, though it consumed most other homes. It was almost like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Where you dwell may not be touched by what's coming, may not be touched, but we will entertain some very high winds. Volcanism, you need to keep that in your head that at some point in the future we're going to have to deal with it. Are your windows sealed? Can you control the airflow in your house? You should think about that. You know, it's fairly inexpensive to get some caulking or to shove stuff in cracks and holes and so forth just to make sure it's sealed up pretty good. In the winter time is the best time to do that because any cracks, and it's cold out there, it will expose that you can feel that cold air. That's what you'll have to seal up. Now, first of all, let me tell you something. If you're protected against ash, you're also protected against infestation of bugs. I just have to throw this in there because the drought is happening. Every time there's a drought, bugs multiply more than usual. Just throwing that out there. You'll be dealing with bugs and critters, bugs. But if your home is sealed from ash and you can control the intake and the output, which means you're going to have to be able to control the air that comes in your home and the air that goes out. If you can work on that, you won't have a problem when the ash flies. See, because the wind will blow with it. It won't accumulate so much on your roof that it will collapse it. If you're not ready to deal with it, it's going to feel like you have flour in your throat all day. You'll be choking and everything else. We see the signs of volcanism. This is, you know what, here's what we should do. When the Lord demonstrates what could potentially happen, why not prepare for it? Why not have that in your mind and say, you know what, it happened here. Let me mentally prepare for this. We have seen power outages take place all over the place. Everybody's talking about an EMP. Forget an EMP. What happens if this old, decrepitated power grid just simply goes down? What about that? What if it happens in just your neighborhood and nowhere else? What if a winter storm comes, an ice storm, and takes out your power? Are you prepared for that? These are things we have to contemplate. These small things. You know what, I've noticed something, and you guys have to who have been in the military. It's always those tiny things that make a huge difference in the comfort when you're out there in the wartime. We're trying to survive. It's the tiny thing. For some people, it's bringing a couple of matches. Right? They may be insignificant for a lot of people. You'd be shocked. Or bringing a small piece of rope. Do you have retainer clips? Things of that nature. Those tiny things that always get you. You can have everything else, all the big stuff. Small things. I used to have a junk bag when I went out there. It had plastic, tops of bottles, straws in there. You name it, I had it in there because it comes in handy. It was a little tiny junk box. I used to keep all that stuff in there. You'd be surprised what a bottle cap can do when you're trying to survive. You'd be shocked of how handy a fork is. You'd be shocked. Anyway, are you preparing for these little things too? Oh, and guess what? If you had to go out or if you had to move anywhere, you know, a lot of people have these little tiny airline bags. And they put all their stuff in there. Normally they forget stuff and go buy it somewhere else. But here's some things you need to have in that bag. You need to have fingernail clippers and a brand new toothbrush and a little bit of baking soda. Not toothpaste, a little bit of baking soda. You know why baking soda you can mix with natural things to brush off your teeth? Most people will forget fingernail clippers and then they'll have a conniption fit when their nails start to grow and it will cause them problems. That's what happens when your nails get too long. You don't want to bite your nails if you're out in the middle of nowhere because then you can have an infection from underneath your nails. All sorts of critters live. What if we have a very bad winter? Power goes out in your neighborhood for 14 days. It's not unusual, folks. Are you ready for that? Those of you who can afford it, do you have LED flashlight? You'll never know how important light is until you're thrust in absolute darkness. Small things. When you're traveling in your car in the winter, do you have a blanket in the back in case something happens to your car and you have to stay warm? Maybe a couple bottles of water or something when you're traveling, just in case. See, those small things like that can mess people up. They don't have the big stuff. They'll say, yes, I'm prepared. But most people don't send themselves through a small test, which is to turn your circuit breaker off. Just tell everybody I'm going to take a break. Tell everybody I'm going to take a break today. and you turn your circuit breaker off, put yourself through a test. Put yourself through the whole test. That way you can tell what's important for you to have and what's not. Because if you've not been through there, you can't determine, normally you can't determine the absolute things you need. Cut your circuit breaker off. Try it out yourself. Then you'll start to realize what's of no use and what's of use. And then when you get hungry, you'll really find out what you need and what you don't need. And then go start writing things down so that you too can be properly prepared. Power outages we're no doubt going to experience. Listen, they're starting a war. They are starting a war. This time, this country will not be immune to this war. You cannot fight a war against terrorists. They are everywhere and can be anybody. We need to be prepared for power outages. You need to be prepared for the times when you can't leave your home. What if you couldn't leave your home for about 3 days? Because the streets are on lockdown, something's going on. Maybe they detected ISIS members in your neighborhood, and everybody's told to stay indoors for 3 days until they track them down. What will you do then? What are you going to do? Put yourself through a scenario, just so you can know and experience what you may have to go through. It's not a bad thing. You'll be well informed, and you'll know what to do, and most importantly, you won't panic. So do that. It's not harmful or anything. Do that so that you can know. Cut power to your house and see how it is. After a while, you find out, no, this is not as bad as I thought it was. For others, it's going to take you to turn off every electronic item in your house for pure silence. You need pure silence until you hear that ringing in your ears. From an abrupt loss of frequencies, your brain is going to start responding, and then it will level out to normal. You guys ever have that when it's too quiet at night, when the TV is off, no fans are moving, nothing is going? You instantly hear a ringing in your ears. It takes a few days for your ears to begin to filter out that stuff. Put yourself through these things, because you know what? You're going to have to experience it. You will. Change your diets too. Find out what you can live off of that's inexpensive, that's dried. That's just like a lot of, I know one guy. He has 2 master bedrooms full of ramen noodles. And when I saw it, I started laughing at first, right? Then I thought about it. At least this guy is stocking up, something. But he had to have protein. He had no protein. He has to have protein. You can have everything else, and if you forget protein, you're going to turn into a bug hunter. You have to have protein. Good 50, 60, 100 grams will do you. You have to have some protein. And protein comes from meat or peanuts, but you need ample protein, or your body starts getting weak and breaking down. Salads and all that stuff does not provide protein. It's just not enough. You have to have protein. So remember that. Remember that, you'll be good to go. If you can have something with fiber and protein, and as I already said, you guys need supplements. That can really help you. Most people who have been stuck in places, they are nutritionally deficient, and that's what causes the real problem. Once your body has no nutrition left in it, your immune system is shot. Bacteria begins to take over. The friendly bacteria can be the worst enemy of the body without nutrition. Your internal organs begin to fail and everything else. Now, most people take that for granted, and I'm telling you, get a multivitamin for yourself. Get a multivitamin. If you run around with an attitude, then you need manganese and magnesium in your system. That will calm you down. There are natural remedies to everything, and it has to do with nutrition. Because if you don't have protein, you don't have proper nutrition, you're going to turn into a bug hunter. Bugs are pretty good in protein, but I'd rather have, something that at least tastes pretty good. Multivites. You need your B complexes. That will stop you from having cloudy thoughts and thinking. Some people run around and they have cloudy thoughts. Their mind is in a fog. They have a vitamin B deficiency. Normally that's what that is. People die from natural causes they call aneurysms. It's actually an aneurysm. It's caused by copper deficiency, which means that your veins have a large amount of copper lined up in the walls, like steel hoses. If you have a copper deficiency, you're going to end up with an aneurysm. People get kidney stones because your body starts to make the wrong type of calcium. And when your body makes calcium, your body can't really pass it. A lot of people with kidney stones It originates with a calcium deficiency. So you need a multivite, you need your minerals and vitamins. Get a multivite, solve the problem. And if you're a smoker, if you smoke cigarettes, you deplete all the vitamins in your system within about 6 to 8 hours. So you would have to take one in the morning and in the afternoon, or the morning and the evening, whichever one you prefer. But they have half the effect in your body because they burn out twice as fast. Just remember that. These are things that can really help you to function in an environment where nobody else can function. And don't think for 1 minute you're getting minerals. And there's one problem with this bottled water, is that it's not alive. Your body is made to drink water that has certain types of bacteria, certain types of organisms in it, which actually makes your body stronger. They cut all that out. All that is non-existent. You used to get high doses of minerals in your water. All that is gone. You get no minerals from water. Now you're drinking bottled water. It has nothing in it. And so you need that multivite to compensate. Most people would feel totally different after they took a multivite for about a week. You'd feel totally different. You wouldn't be in a haze. You wouldn't have a bad attitude. Your anxiety levels would go down. Everything would begin to regulate itself. You'd feel totally different. Just for the multivite. You know, you not having proper nutrition is like running your car without oil and water. It'll run for a little while and then poof. Once your engine block blows, that car's no good. It'll keep running. But when it breaks, it's really going to break. The engine's going to seize up and everything else. Most of the folks in the United States are nutritionally deficient and they're not aware of it. Oh, and by the way, fluoride in your water, if you have the correct dosage of zinc in your diet, chromium bicarbonate, it nullifies the effect of fluoride. Fluoride is nullified. Just like sugar is nullified in coffee. How many people know that? Sugar is nullified in coffee. In other words, it's burnt up. The calorie value is burned up in coffee. Other people don't know that either, so they put the embalming fluid, the sugar substitute in their coffee, and they drink it. I call it embalming fluid. Okay, folks, back on topic, the winds. Volcanism is certainly increasing. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have zinc, you'll begin to lose your taste. Zinc will increase the responsiveness of your taste buds. And if you lose your taste, you can't smell. And some people have that problem. They don't know why. It's because they have no zinc in their system. You know what? Coffee filters, by the way, are the most useful thing you can ever have. So you might want to add that to your list of things to have. And get the ones from Mr. Coffee, because the holes, the fiber holes, are a lot smaller than your generic brand, which means they filter out a lot more. So get some coffee filters. They have good uses. Get some coffee filters. Anyway, we'll likely deal with volcanism in a few places. Now, if it's a small, just imagine Mount St. Helens in a remote area shooting ash in the stratosphere. At first, it won't seem like a lot, but it depends on how long the eruption lasts and the amount it's actually ejecting into the stratosphere. If it begins to eject a lot, let me tell you what will happen. You're going to notice a change in the sunlight. Sunlight affects plants. Plants will not grow as fast, crops will start to fail, temperatures will begin to fluctuate and go down, bugs will flourish, and so will rodents. Rodents, rats in particular, will begin to reproduce because they have no opposition. All the animals are dying off. And then guess what? What do you do with the dead animals? They'll likely get Ebola or something like that. They'll be infected. Then they'll begin to contaminate the soil going into the water supply. This is explained in the book of Revelation, and a lot of people read Revelation as though one event takes place and it's all cleaned up, then another event takes place and that's all cleaned. No, it layers one on top of the other. Now you're dealing with problem after problem after problem after problem. All this will be taking place. Listen, we're being affected by so many things, and people are being so conditioned not to even listen to it. The problem of Fukushima has not gone away. It's affecting the oceans right now, and things are about to change. Don't play with your salvation. People are being snatched, and I'm not talking about being held hostage by ISIS either. People are being snatched. Believe it or not, I heard a rumor this could actually become a public problem, the people being snatched. Cover stories will be made for this. See, people don't like to talk about these subjects because they say, well, that's just too unbelievable. Well, it doesn't matter. It's still happening. Jesus told them he would raise from the dead. Oh, we don't want to hear about that, but it's too late. It's going to happen. People don't want to discuss Revelation. They discuss it as though they're not going to experience any of it. Wrong. I can tell you right now, that's wrong. One of the greatest delusions is that Revelation is not happening. And even at that time, Jesus said the time is at hand. The time is happening. We know that the Lord works almost like echoes. What he did once, he does again. A situation that took place one time will happen again. Yet people still play with their salvation. They're still stepping into the world. One day, people are going to find out. See, you can only step into the world so many times before it's your last step, and you'll never come back. Prayer is needed for your brothers and sisters more than ever these days. No one should get tired of prayer. Keep your brothers and sisters in mind. You do not have to name them all. Keep them in mind. Keep them in prayer. Keep your families in prayer, whether they hate you or not. Keep those you know in prayer, whether they hate you or not. People need it. They just don't understand how much they need it. Because the restrainer has been restraining a great many things. Many things have been held back. We have seen what could happen. Everything we're saying are things that could happen but are being held back. But one day, the book of life will be full. The Lamb's book of life will be full, complete. You see, in the Bible it says a certain number must come before these things happen. When they were under the altar, it also said a certain number of them, their brethren, those with the message they had to be killed, and then they would have their vengeance. You see, one day the book of life will be complete. That will be that. That's going to be that. We don't know if the book of life could be complete a week from now. And then what? Wherever you are, on either side, that's where you're going to be. But there will be a tumultuous time. And even in that time, God said, if they call upon my name, I'll turn and answer them, because he knows their intent. So when they call out from the heart, he'll answer them, because he knows their intent. Even at the last opportunity in a tumultuous time, they'll have an opportunity. But you still have people toying with their salvation. Your race or your call could come in 30 minutes, and that's the end of your life. Because you're not promised tomorrow. And whatever you've done or whatever you failed to do, that's what you're going to have to deal with. We can't play with our salvation. Certainly not in this time, because people need you. Okay, back to the wind thing. The models still indicate 150 plus mile an hour winds. Now, listen, these are not winds caused from a regular storm. What the models are picking up, there are fluctuations in the northern hemisphere that will meet, where these two systems will meet, because it's forming up, kind of like Jupiter, right there on the line near the 37th parallel, will be isobars, so compact, I mean very compact. Can you imagine a low-pressure system the size of the northern hemisphere and a high-pressure system the size of the southern hemisphere colliding? Do you understand what that would cause? The isobars in between those two storms would cause winds in excess of 150, just like Jupiter. This is what the models indicating are coming. Why? Because the northern hemisphere is having a jet stream realignment. And in the southern hemisphere, another jet stream is forming, but in the opposite direction. One going one way, one going the other. Can you imagine what's going to happen when they meet? We're going to have winds that we never thought were possible. Conditions you never thought were possible. It could literally knock down skyscrapers and everything else. That's what's happening. That's what the models are picking up. Something has happened in the northern regions of this world, near the North Pole. All the conditions are changing in the North Pole. There are regions that have long been covered by ice, and there's green there now. Now, I won't go into depth on that. Don't ask me about it, but there are regions there. They're heating up to 80 degrees. How in the world can it be 80 degrees at the North Pole? 80 degrees in certain spots? Are you kidding? Well, care for you, the ozone is gone. That's not the only thing that's gone. The atmosphere acts as a filter to ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet light reaches the surface. It begins to heat up things. Microwaves begin to heat up things. That's why the temperatures get to, and there is a zone where nobody can go into. Because if you do, you may not make it out. That's right. Methane gas is adding to the problem, coming up from everywhere, not just the North Pole. It's coming up from everywhere. Something is happening below the crust of the Earth. There's an expansion event taking place and a compression event in the atmosphere taking place at the same exact time. One of the cautions is that this thing could form if there's one of two conditions. Well, if it continues, it's going to form anyway and take its toll. But a severe cold front or a severe heat wave could trigger it. Now, the heat wave would have to be in the northern hemisphere. The cold front would have to be in the southern hemisphere. If those two conditions are met, it could trigger it off. And you know what? We came close not too long ago. But the models still indicate that this is going to take place. So we will entertain winds. I'm inclined to trust this model. The reason being is because the weather models have come a long way. They've come a long way. And with the more variables and trends and everything that they gather, the future trending is becoming more and more accurate. Just more and more accurate. And it's really good at tornadoes. It actually does track paths to give a probable path of a tornado. And it's fairly accurate. It's very accurate. Wind tracing and everything. Really crunch some numbers. Anyway, and if we do, then the high winds are coming. That shouldn't surprise anybody. The volcanism combined with the winds, that could be an issue. That could very well be an issue. Now, we have the winds and the blood rain. Oh, and by the way, concerning the weather, they do expect the jet stream to reverse its flow. Now, what happens in the 90s, it will happen again. Small things, folks, small things. Consider the small things. Some of the technology that people have stumbled across utilize massive amounts of heat, materials and magma, and everything else to recharge. They do go in and out of the sun, in and out of volcanoes. Even under the water, they go in and out of volcanoes. That's pretty common. They catch them all the time, and everything else. Well, Tatum, you'll have to figure that out. Pets that live inside, they have to go outside. Well, they can't go outside and breathe ash. That's glass particles that will go down their throat. It will begin to affect their bones. It'll begin to eat them up from the inside out. So going outside wouldn't be a good idea for animals or pets. And you know what? If ash did come, you know the livestock is going to be the first to pay the price. If the livestock begins to pay the price, the food system breaks down. And if something affects the grain belt in America, that will affect the world. It will affect the world. Here's what people don't know. Everybody's fighting for oil, correct? That's what they think. Everybody's fighting for oil. You know what's more precious than oil? Food is. What happens? What happens if a war starts? Now, please hear me closely. If a war begins in the Middle East, carries on to Africa and Europe and other nations, their crops are destroyed. Where's the only other place they can get their grains from? Does that not come from the United States? Do you really think they would allow the U.S., of which they hate, to govern all that grain to them after they've destroyed themselves? They're already angry, destroying each other. That means we're going to be involved. You see, the oil fields will likely be set on fire. Likely, sabotage will happen. And they want a war, and they're going to pull out the stops. They're going to try to do this thing. I can tell you right now, they want a world war. You're going to see things you never thought people would be crazy enough to do. Countries will be involved that have never been involved before. We have a coalition. Listen, we have declared war without declaring war. There are 10 nations that are working together to fight ISIS. Do you think there's going to be some feedback from that, blowback from that? Listen, the sides have been selected, and a war is beginning. This just won't be any war. This is very unconventional. It's not your standard war with heroes. This is going to be a war of sneaky tactics, lots of casualties. The way ISIS pays people back, the way they pay people back, you strike them, they strike your country or your people. They strike children and women. That's what their retaliation tactic is. You strike them, they cause more fear. That's going to set the Middle East on fire. And Israel is right in the center of it. Don't think for a minute this thing is going to calm down. And I told you before, even if ISIS goes away, what is done has already started the momentum, and it will be carried out to completion. A process has started, and it's not going to end without a bang. And it's time for us to stand vigilant, to actually be watching, to observe and test all things, to walk in full confidence and trust in our Father, not fearful, to balance what you learn. Don't give the news 12 hours of your attention and give the Lord just 1 hour. You better balance what you're taking in with the Word of God, because if you don't, you'll be lost in propaganda. Now that we've hit critical times, you absolutely will see the earth respond, and it will be in relation to the violence in the earth. You know why? That's what the Bible says in the book of Isaiah. The earth is cursed. It will shake violently. Things will happen in the earth in direct response to the violence that's rising on the earth. We will see blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. It's also in the book of Isaiah or Joel. Those pillars of smoke could be from volcanoes, or they could be from large explosions. People's eyes and tongues will melt away while they yet stand on their feet. Their flesh will be burned right off the bone while they're standing up. Somebody, when they saw that, they could have seen a nuclear blast in slow motion, because it will burn your flesh off of your bones while you're still standing on your feet. That's right, James. Well, you know what? The more this thing rises, because you're a child of God, and the more this violence raises, we know that that harvest is close. That brings the harvest close, 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 close. Those are signs, those are going to be the wonders in heaven. A golden sky. Imagine a sky that's golden. A plasma dancing all over the place. In the sky, plasma. It's very hot, beautiful at first. It'll look like colorful auroras in the sky dancing around. It will no doubt capture the attention of a great many people. Then it will become deadly. That's 2015, 12 Pine. According to their calculation, yes, things are changing, but the Lord's absolutely in control. And folks, this is just the conventional side of the real world we live in. There are things out there that you're being protected from. Every day you should be thankful to your Lord and Savior for having such mercy on us, because we do mess up. Can you imagine if he lifted his hand of mercy off of us? But he doesn't. Things are being held back until the children are ready. But listen, one day the book of life will be complete. Be on the right side. Be true to the side of the Lord. You know, we adopt a lifestyle over the years. Let's adopt his teaching. Let that be our guide in our walk as a new man or new woman on this earth. And let us never go back to the old person. Let us walk in the new person.
Notice also in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers. It takes the grace of God to change us, folks. How can you be saved if you're not willing to repent? And the Lord Jesus Christ said, except ye repent, ye shall all likewise perish.